What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one, I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down when Jerome Powell is going to be speaking for tomorrow and how this could affect the markets, what's going on with the news affecting Tesla, what you should be watching for as time progresses, as Tesla is going to be reaching some critical levels very, very soon. But before I break anything down all this information, though, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I am firstly not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you are guaranteed up to 5 free stocks. This offer ends in just 8 days, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, let's break down what's going on with the market and Tesla. Tesla got a nice green day today as we started to see some buyers stepping in. Tesla was following the other leaders of the market, which were like Amazon and Apple and Nvda, helping the market hold up the way it did. And Tesla ended up playing a game of catch up because Tesla was very slow in the beginning. It wasn't really pumping that much for the first couple of hours. And then towards like the second half of the day, we started to see Tesla play catch up and it started to push up a bit. But the question is, will Tesla pump even more? Are we about to see a big move to the upside, or is this going to lead to a pump and dump very soon? And the answer is going to depend on many different factors, such as how Tesla reacts to these levels and also Jerome Powell. So when is Powell giving his little speech? The answer is tomorrow at 9:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have Powell giving his speech. We also have the 17-week bill auction and 10-year note auction all coming out at 11:30 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have a couple of other Fed speakers, but it's not going to be as significant as Powell. So Powell is going to be announcing some interesting stuff. Now, Powell is giving his speech. He's going to be giving the opening remarks at the Division of Research of Statistics Centennial Conference. This is going to be in Washington, D.C. And even though it says it's his opening remarks, remember that this could still affect the markets because the last time Jerome Powell did this, which was just a couple of weeks ago, this caused the market to drop even more. So am I saying this means the market has to drop more because of this? The answer is no. I'm not saying that's going to happen as a guarantee. I'm simply warning you that if Jerome Powell says anything about the economy, if he makes any comments about the current monetary policy of the Fed or anything involving inflation and such, I mean, it's going to cause the market to move most likely. So make sure you're prepared for this and make sure you're ready. Be prepared for some volatility just to be safe right before the market opens. So whatever Powell says could cause some volatility. We'll see about that. And then when it comes to other things affecting the markets, we have some earnings coming out. This might not be that big, but we have Disney's earnings after the market closes tomorrow. Disney could affect the market to some extent, but it may not be that crazy like compared to like an Apple earnings or an Amazon or a Microsoft or something else like that. We'll see what Disney brings for the markets. And besides that, the fear and greed index is less fearful than before. The market used to be extremely fearful. Now we're seeing most of these indicators becoming neutral and stuff like that. So it's not bad whatsoever. And we're starting to see the market just kind of changing its emotion. The market is becoming less and less inclined for capitulation and things like that. And we're starting to see some buyers trying to step in. However, I do have to warn you that the market's approaching some key resistance levels, and this could change this rally very soon. Let me just break those down in a few minutes. The Nasdaq is continuing to push. We're at the longest streak since November of 2021 in favor of the bulls. This is still very interesting. Same thing with the S&P 500. When it comes to Tesla, however, some new news has come out involving the strikes going on in Sweden. This is important because many of the service workers over there have come out and they're going to continue to do what's necessary. I read that they're actually blocking some of the ports over there, which is having a big effect on Tesla. This could, continue to expand across other parts of Europe. This is not necessarily confirmed yet, but these unions could end up impacting Tesla and other developments over there. So we'll be watching very, very carefully to see what happens with this. We're going to be watching to see what happens with these strikes and if they continue to grow across Europe. And we'll be watching to see if the UAW does find a way to try to get Tesla involved. I'm really hoping that is not the case. So we'll just be very patient. I'm keeping this news in the back of my mind in case there's a big development, because this could definitely affect Tesla's share price. We'll be waiting for that as time goes on anyways. Morgan Stanley gave Tesla an overweight rating, saying Tesla's going to eventually outperform the markets. Price-price ratio is kind of flat because Tesla's performing very equally with the market right now. And on top of this, we have a tendency of being green only about 48% of the time on Wednesdays. They're not the strongest days of the week historically. Look for more volatility around 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern time and also around 2 o'clock p.m. And we're going to see more volatility during those hours. At least historically, that's what tends to happen. And November could still be very strong for Tesla. I think we could start off a little weak. I mean, we got a nice pump to start us off, but we could see a little bit of downside soon, at least in the future, as the market is due to pull back soon. But then later on to end November, I think Tesla will be very strong thanks to the Cybertruck event. And I'll be breaking that down in more detail in just a couple of minutes. And then finally, we have the volume at 117 million. Not bad whatsoever, as we're starting to see some interest in the stock. But the question is, will Tesla pump higher, or are we about to see something change? So it's very important to note that on SPY, we're approaching some key resistance, and this could affect Tesla. When you look at SPY, this is looking bullish. We're making higher highs and higher lows. We have this wedge that's forming, and we could be forming another flag to lead to another breakout. However, if we do see the full measured move play out and this thing breaks out towards this area, please know that historically, SPY has some strong resistance at 438, and we've seen this thing get rejected in that area many times in the past. We've had 3 or 4 rejections over the last few months in that area, and that could lead to more downside. So you want to be very careful in this 438 area. That is where we have this tight resistance. So we'll see what Jerome Powell causes. So going back to SPY, I'm going to talk about SPY first, then Tesla. So if we're bullish, let me just go over the possibilities, then what I think is more likely. If we're bullish thanks to Powell and all these different factors, watch 438 as a zone of resistance. If we break this, we're going to be watching for another push for 440. But remember, 438 is going to be very strong resistance, so be very careful up there. If we're bearish, thanks to Powell and the news that comes out, I don't know what Powell is going to say, so just be kind of careful. But it could still affect us. If we break down, you're going to be watching us come down towards this imbalance at 435.5. If we lose that, watch the support right here, which is where we have this channel, very close to 435 flat. And if we lose that, we're going to be sinking towards 434.5, then 433. To turn super bearish, we need to lose 433. So either way, guys, this is what we're looking like. But what is more likely to happen? What's the most likely possibility? Based off the current trend, as the market's holding up nicely and we're seeing buyers stepping in, and based off the daily candle, let me show you the daily on SPY before I end up switching to Tesla. We look more bullish. We're still looking bullish on the daily. And it looks like there could be a bit more upside. I think it wants to tag this 438 area. So we're going to be watching that very carefully. My gut tells me, the odds do favor us coming up to 438 and seeing a lot of chop up here. There's going to be some very tight resistance, and then we may just reject from here and start cooling off a bit. So we're going to be watching 438, watch the test up here. Do we break this or do we reject off of this? It all depends on how we end up reacting to this resistance, what the data looks like for tomorrow in terms of the auctions and the notes that are coming out, and also what Jerome Powell says. So watch this area. I think we're going to pump a bit more and we'll see how it reacts, but there could be a rejection. For Tesla, if the market is going to pump a bit more, there is going to be a possibility of Tesla pumping as well, just a little bit more, since we have this like a wedge-like pattern that's forming. If Tesla breaks a little higher, we're going to be watching this resistance up here, near the high of the day from today, so around this 223 area. If we get above this, we could see this thing get very close to 225. If we get above that, you're going to be watching 227 to 228 and then 230 above that. So do I think Tesla's going to rocket? The answer is not necessarily. I think we're going to see a lot of shop and stuff like that. But make sure you watch those levels as resistance. For support, if Tesla breaks down, you're going to be watching 218. If we lose that, well, I'm sorry, we have 220, then 218. And then if we lose that, we have 216.8. 215 to 214, and to turn really bearish, you want to be seeing Tesla lose 214. So the most likely possibility, in my opinion, just based off technicals, and this is a little tricky because I don't know what Jerome Powell is going to say in the morning, but I would say that Tesla may pop a bit more, just a little bit more. We could get very close to 225, and then we could see a big rejection. And we might see Tesla sink back down to 220 and just kind of range trade for a bit. And if the market gets a big rejection, if SPY rejects off 438 in that area and starts sinking, that's when Tesla's going to start coming back down to 216.8 to 215. So I think that the most likely possibility for Tesla is a pump initially, followed by a rejection, some sideways price action, and then possibly a dump later on. I think there's a good chance it could still come down later on, but we just need some time to get there. All right, so we're going to be watching these levels. Don't forget that the daily on Tesla, it's not looking too bad. If you look at Tesla on the daily, not looking the worst. worst is it looks like it could get very close to this 200 EMA if we break the high before rejecting. So it could pop a bit more, trade sideways, and maybe reject as time goes on. So just be very careful with it and watch for any divergences. On Nvidia, I want to call out something very interesting. Nvidia is at resistance. It's between 460 and 462, the level I called out yesterday. So we're going to be watching the 462 area. If Nvidia rejects off that, expect it to come back down towards 450. If we break above this, we could get close to 465. It all depends on Powell. Now, the most likely possibility, in my opinion, is when you look at historical data, Nvidia tends to reject off 462. There's also some resistance at 462.5, like that entire area. So I'm thinking that Nvidia will likely it may pump a little bit more. It may retest 462 to 462.5, maybe go a little higher to 465 if we do break it, but then we might reject at one of those levels. We might see this thing cool off a bit and retest 455 after that. So a pop and drop is what I'm anticipating over the next few days. And I think that it's due for that because we have a bearish divergence developing intraday on Nvidia right here. So if Nvidia ends up, pumping a little bit more and it maintains this divergence, we could see it sink later. We're also losing momentum on the MACD, so I could see it slowing down back into like the 455 area, if not 450. It may pop a bit more first, trade sideways, and then sell off just like that of SPY. And I'm anticipating that as a possibility. So just be very careful at the tight resistance we're in, and we will see what Powell causes. This is just based off technicals, guys. I'm not as confident in technicals alone since it depends on other factors, but it is certainly possible. So looking at the QQQ, just under 374, we have some tight resistance. We're going to be watching to see if we reject off this area or not. If we're bullish, you want to see it break above the high from today and retest 374 and then break that, get up to 375. If we're bearish, you want to see it break down below 372. If we lose that, watch 371 and 370. If we break below 370, we're going to turn even more bearish. What do I think is more likely? I think that we might pop a bit more and retest 374 because that's where we got a rejection or very close to where we rejected in the past. Then we might see a rejection of 374 to 375 before this thing starts sinking again. So I think a pop and drop is very possible for either tomorrow or we may just like hold up tomorrow and then start sinking later on as the days pass. So a little more upside before downside is very probable looking at the trend. Last but not least, we're going to be looking at Aapl on TradingView. We were calling this bullish wedge on Aapl yesterday. I was saying that this thing may have some upside. Yes, the upside came. But at 182, we have some tight resistance on Aapl. So I don't know if we're going to break this or not. It depends on Powell. If we break this, we could get very close to 183.5 to 185 and then reject. So a little bit more upside than a rejection. Or if it fails to hold 182, then we could just reject from here and sink towards 180. So we're going to be watching that very carefully. In my opinion, it could pop a little bit more, maybe hit the very low 182s, and it's going to make an attempt to try to hold it. If this attempt fails, expect it to come back down to 180. If it succeeds, it could pump more. My guts tells me it's going to pump a little bit, just temporarily hold up for a bit, and start selling off as time goes on since we're due for it. And I think that Aapl may establish a bearish divergence soon. So I think that we're going to sell off soon. We may pump a bit more in the market, trade sideways before we start seeing some downside. Now, I'm just going to go over a couple more tickers very quickly. If you look at the IWM, it's looking a bit more bearish on the daily. So look for a little pop towards 172, which is where we have our 200 EMA, but then a rejection from there for more potential downside. I think it's going to eventually retest 169. So look for a little pop and drop. I think that that is very possible. On Microsoft, we're very close to tight resistance between 162.5 and then 160. I'm sorry, not 362.5 and then 366. Sorry about that, guys. Up there, that's where we have this tight resistance. Up here, I think that we might pump a little bit more and then reject, or we just reject off 362.5. One of those two has to be it. If we break 362.5, we could get very close to 365 to 366 and then reject, or it could just reject from here to fill the gap. It's got to be one of those two. So I think Microsoft will reject soon. So look for a little bit more upside than a rejection. On AMD, we're very close to filling our gap near 116. I think that we could make an attempt to do so, like right about here. It may pump a little bit more than reject. So look for a little pump and drop on AMD. That is very much a possibility. Looking at a couple of others, if you look at the VIX, for example, we have a bullish divergence that's starting to develop, which tells us that this thing is going to bounce soon. And it's going to likely be led by or caused by the market potentially selling off. So look for a little bounce. it could be retesting this 15 plus area before rejecting. So that tells us that the market may bounce. The market may bounce a bit and then end up dropping soon. So we're going to be watching to see if we maintain this bullish divergence, if maybe the VIX drops a bit more than bounces, and then the market ends up basically pumping and then rejecting. The VIX is suggesting that the SQQQ is kind of oversold, and we're also starting to establish a very slight bullish divergence. Actually, I think it's a very slight one. So I'm thinking that this thing is at support in this 18 area. Maybe the market pumps a little bit more, but then eventually this is going to bounce and make its way back up to 19 plus over the next week or so. And the market will see some downside soon. We're just not ready yet. The dollar index looks like it may cool off a bit as the market tries to pump a bit. But if this thing comes back down towards this like 105 area, it could be establishing an inverse head and shoulders. So we have like a left shoulder here, right shoulder forming before it bounces even higher towards these imbalances. That tells me that the market may pump a bit more, then reject later on, maybe by tomorrow, if not by the later days. On Coinbase, we're establishing this resistance at 89 to 90. We've gotten rejected here many times historically. So I think that with this bearish divergence, we may pop a bit more into like the very low 90s than reject, or reject from here to retest 85. So look for a potential rejection on Coinbase. On Google, we still look bullish, especially on the daily, but watch resistance at 135. And we're also kind of like fighting this 200 EMA. So I'm going to be watching these levels carefully. It's still kind of tight. It does not look like it's done yet. It looks like it's still kind of bullish on the daily. So I could see like 135 before it rejects. So I'm going to be looking for a little bit more upside on Google before we see some downside. The 10-year treasury yield is still kind of flat right now. If you want to see this thing bounce and break towards 47 plus, that's when you could turn more bearish. On Amazon, we look a bit more bullish. I think it pops a little bit more before we get a rejection because we have this gap up here at 144 to 146. So I think it might get very close to 144 to 146 around that area, pump a little bit more, then reject based off historical data. And I think that it might end up coming back down. Look for a little pop and then drop. And I think that that's going to affect the market. The market may pop a bit more than drop. On Meta, we're approaching some tight resistance around 325 or so. We're very close to that. Maybe it pops a bit more towards 325 to 326, and then it just rejects. So we might see a little bit more upside than a rejection, and then we might see this thing cool off on the RSI just a little bit to retest 314. So anyways, that's it for this one. Thank you all so much for listening. Please remain calm, cool, and collected. And just know that as far as the market goes, we're going to be watching to see what Jerome Powell says. We're also going to be looking at our technicals in a very, very meticulous manner as time goes on. So we'll see what happens with the moves. A pump and drop throughout the market is still a very real possibility. The market is going to be approaching some tight resistance levels, so don't assume it's just going to drop automatically. Wait and see for it to happen before making moves, guys. That's something that's very important. And just be very careful. That's what I would say. Just be very careful. The market is very tricky, but do what you have to do and get ready for the tight resistance to be tested. All right. So that's what I'm seeing for the markets. Watch your levels carefully, and I'll see you all very, very soon. Thanks again, and peace out.